the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg, and your Colonial champion, Sean McCoy. Welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast!
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, once again to the Court-Martail Podcast. And as advertised, we are back to bring you our analysis of Season 4 of Dark Side of the Ring, the Jason Eisner and Evan Husney-led production. I am your Colonial champion, Sean McCarty, and we're going to break down the episodes, not necessarily completely in depth, but our takeaways from them, how we feel about the series as a whole, and where do we go from here. But to do it with me is the man of the hour, the man with the power. He is too sweet to be sour. He is the Bay Area Brawler himself, the master of lancing those trays and eating what's on them. Skylar Greenberg, how you doing, buddy?
Say you'll remember me, standing in a nice dress, staring at the sunset, babe, red lips and rosy cheeks. Say you'll see me again, even if it's just in your wildest dreams. Okay, I'll stop now.
Yeah, let's leave the memories alone. And while we have that, and
1989 Taylor Swift coming out, Taylor's version. Actually, it's Skylar's version now.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'll tell you what. While our producers are trying to figure out who's gonna sue us for whatever that Skylar put in, and then what I just threw in, because Ric Flair is trying to get any buck he can, but let's not talk about him just yet. We might get to him later. How you doing, my friend? We actually got our act together enough to actually do something other than a pay-per-view review for a change.
Well, I think part of it is that a lot of stuff has been happening, and I think we need to recap all of that stuff that's been happening.
Well, and there's only one good way to do it. You know how it goes, I know how it goes, and let that intro roll, baby.
Coming straight to you from the Golden Gate Garage, this is the Wrestle News with Skylar Green.
That is right, boys, girls, and children of all ages. It is the news of the week with the Bay Area Brawler, Skylar Greenberg at your service. And Sean, we're going to go on the collision course. Wink, wink.
Yeah, they make that a really, really easy layup joke with a show name like that. But it seems like they just can't help running into stuff.
They just can't keep help of bumping into the kitchen table.
Seriously.
In particular,
this company is perpetually stubbing its toe on the corner of the bed. And it's like, god damn, man. Like, what are we ever going to get some, like, just peace in this company?
Absolutely not.
No.
So the reason why there has been more upsetness at people in this company is what happened with an after Collision episode promo that was done by CM Punk in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Yeah, which
and this one
he was stirring shit up with. He was he was just stirring. I think in this one he was just kind of like stirring people up for the sake of doing it, just kind of keep people invested in what their issues were. But still, please regale us with what was said and who it was said to.
Well, essentially what happened was everyone knows about the show that they recorded in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I think this was the Collision. Now, don't remind me if this was the Collision where CM Punk and FTR also honored
Dennis Condrey. Yes.
Dennis Condrey.
Yes, they did. Yeah, which also was super nice to see. That was a really nice moment to give Dennis, and God, you want to talk about when my jaw hitting the floor. When I saw the clip on YouTube, I'm like, well, first of all, I didn't even know Dennis Condrey would be able to get into the ring at this point. I didn't know what his physical condition was. But holy hell, man, I was like, I never thought I'd see Dennis Condrey in a ring again.
Well, I think it was just convenient that he does live in North Carolina, and I think he was there for a show. I think it was like
it was like a fan fest, right? He was doing like signings or something like that, and he just happened to be there.
Yeah, he was at a wrestling con. He was invited to come into the ring by Punk and FTR to do some talking, talk to people, and get some cheers. But then what happened is that Punk proceeds to start talking shit about Adam Hangman Page. And my only question is, of course he's doing it. Of course he's doing it.
Yeah,
come on.
This has to be a program. This has to be he's working people. It has to be. Unless Punk is just at the point where like, well, I don't have a real boss, so I can just do whatever the fuck I feel like. Which is entirely possible. I won't lie to you about that. That is entirely possible.
Given the fact that there was a report that after the Ricky Starks and CM Punk match that happened a couple of weeks ago, and when CM Punk got to the back, Tony Khan started shouting CM Punk, CM Punk, CM Punk like a mark.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, that's what he is. We've known this. But it's just, I don't know what to say at this point, because this wasn't the only thing, the only shit stirring that Punk would be doing over the past couple of weeks. And all of these...
Exactly. This is just part of it. And there were other parts too, that Punk is very strict on people who are allowed to go to Collision and people who are not. One of the fun ones is Nick Nemeth, a.k.a. Dolph Ziggler's less famous brother.
Yep. Now that
because
one
Nick
I
Nemeth
heard
was
that...
on the Bucks side.
Well, that one I heard that Ryan Nemeth made a tweet basically calling Punk soft. And so Punk got in his face said, "Do we have a problem, son?" And, you know, obviously he took his tail between his legs, and that Punk said, "Hey, do we have anything further to say? No? Then get the fuck out of here." I mean, that's... And I heard people calling Punk soft for doing that. I'm like, well, if that's being soft, then what is your definition of tough? Going and tucking your tail between your legs and going and tell Tony, Punk was yelling at me in front of the boys.
Well, no, what it is 5 people going into the same locker room to confront an injured person.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's how it's done. But...
And part of that is that Punk still has residual heat with Christopher Daniels, who was involved in that.
Yeah, I don't understand that. What was Daniels' involvement in that, though? I know he broke up the fight, but that was all I had ever heard about him being involved in that. But I do remember him being suspended.
He was suspended for his part in the fight, but apparently what happened was Christopher Daniels was involved in trying to break up the fight, but he was more on the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega side of things.
Okay, so I understand Punk is holding some level of resentment, but let me ask you something. Because Punk, in the ESPN article, openly apologized and said that was not the right place to do that. I put everyone in a bad position, right? And then this thing with Adam Page, he just recently also apologized for that one. Said, hey, look, that didn't come off the way that I wanted it to come off. I was, and I'm apologize for that too. Do you think that anyone in that entire little kitty clique that's going on there, you think any one of them has apologized for any of the behavior that they've done that Punk has responded to over the past year and change? The damage that they've done to his reputation. Do you think they've apologized any for doing that? Honestly.
Well, I mean, given the fact that the reports say that they do not talk to each other, and the last time that Punk tried to apologize to them, they said, talk to our lawyers.
Yeah, so who are the professional ones here? Who's the real softies in this situation? The ones who are going out on Twitter and not saying things to his face, or the ones that cower and put their tail between their legs when they are confronted because they don't want to be a man and deal with somebody who has the balls to challenge them, and then they have the balls to say that CM Punk is weak and they bring up his UFC fights when it doesn't seem like Punk is worried at all about tussling with these jagoffs. And none of them want to engage because they all know the truth. They'll get their asses handed to them, and they're going to look like the children that they all are. And this is coming from somebody who is no Punk fan, right? I'm really not. I'm tired of him whining all the time I'm tired of him getting everything he wants and it's still not being enough. But when you've got someone openly apologizing and openly saying, okay, I was out of line for saying the things I've said, when all he's doing is reacting to this hush-hush, cliquey, high school drama class garbage, what do you want him to do? He's obviously, you know, it's like he's the biggest draw that they've got, bar none. Bar none. Biggest draw that they've got. Even though, like, well, they only got 400,000 views. Well, because they're facing SummerSlam. If the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega fought against SummerSlam, they would have been in the 200,000s. I guarantee you that. Anyway, my point here is that CM Punk is all he's doing is trying to run some level of professionalism in what is a very unprofessional environment in AEW in general. And it's a system that is going to go against the grain of professionalism anytime they want. That's why we get the two little mini Michaels clones doing what they do and saying what they say and getting all of the real tough guys to look like they're being assholes and that they're just the victims because they're just trying to perform their cute little art. And how adorable is that? Multi-year contracts, EVPs, ladies and gentlemen. That's AEW.
And again, CM Punk, even after all the drama, still does want to work with all of them because he wants to make money, and they keep refusing.
Yeah, and God forbid Punk try to just keep that fresh in people's minds so eventually somebody from that group recognizes the kind of money they could draw by having the program. But instead, we're going to get the Young Bucks beating FTR and winning that feud. Because FTR will do business. And Punk just has higher standards, I suppose. Or they just don't have a resentment for FTR, even though they're buddy-buddy with Punk anyway.
Do you think there's any chance that FTR keep the title and beat the Bucks?
Zero chance. Zero chance. The only way they do is if they have agreed, and if they've agreed to fight Punk. Because he'd have to get involved. That's the only way I could, because what else do you do? There's no way FTR beat the Bucks clean, not after multi-year contracts are re-signed. There's no shot. There's zero chance that they're doing that. There's zero chance they're not walking away.
But FTR signed multi-year contracts too.
And do you think, when did they do that, just recently?
A couple months ago.
A couple months ago, sure. But Tony's got his toys back. The ones he really wants to play with. And the ones that are his friends. FTR is there to do business. The Elite are his friends. And the friends will always get preferential treatment. Ask 1995 Vince McMahon and the Clique. And ask literally any time in WCW. We're going to get to that in just a second. And ask anytime in wrestling history when anyone has had the ear of the promoter, friends always prevail. And that's what's going to happen at All In. Guaranteed. There's no way FTR walk away from that with the belts unless they do some sort of fuckery that I've never even heard of. Do you disagree? Is there any way that you see them leaving without those belts?
Can I have hope?
You can, but do you have a plan? What scenario do you envision that they're just going to win clean? How do you see that match going?
No. They're not going to win clean. Let's be clear. They're not going to win clean. The only way they're going to win at all is if CM Punk gets involved.
Yeah. Either that or they're going to have FTR turn and like cheat to win, and then the Bucks are going to try to be baby faces again, which they are very clearly not, because let's be real. The Young Bucks have probably maybe less momentum than they've ever had in their entire careers as of right now.
But they are they could go on to a 5-match series or a 7-match series.
Well, because that drew so well when they did the Elite versus the Death Triangle that, and this is Tony Khan, and he genuinely believes that was successful. So you may not be wrong, Sky. That could be just the kind of markish booking that Tony is stealing from our channel as we speak.
But we're gonna get away from the Marcus booking for now, and we're gonna go to the other booking on the other side of the pond.
All right.
We're gonna head to WWE, and we're gonna talk about a legend of WWE, the Rated R Superstar Edge.
Yes, sir. But for how long?
Now, that's the question. See, Edge has been booked for a match on the 18th in Toronto on SmackDown against Sheamus.
Which may be today, depending on when this airs.
Depending on when this airs. According to Ron Hutchinson, Edge's longtime personal trainer, the belief is that this will be Edge's last match. And the reason why Edge has not wanted to make it a bigger deal than it needs to be is because he wants to go out in a genuinely soft, quiet manner. He doesn't want to make much fanfare of it.
Which I can respect. I think that Edge, well, because, you know, the last thing you want to do is end up in that Undertaker cycle. You know? Where you have bad match, have to have a better match to redeem yourself. That happens 3 or 4 times, and then the pandemic takes your career away from you.
Not to mention, Edge has already had his emotional retirement the first time due to the neck injuries.
Right. So, you know, and he's already a Hall of Famer, so it's not like we're waiting for him to get, you know, cast into that. And I watched the clip on SmackDown. I like the lore. I like the history behind those two and just like the genuine level of respect, you know, shown between these two. And if I will admit, there is no better person, I believe, who could take care of Edge this way, quite like Sheamus. I think this is a good choice for both of them.
Of course, the question is Edge going to win or is Sheamus going to win?
I can't imagine that Edge would go over in his last match. You know, blah, yada, yada, time-honored tradition, blah, 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 Brett screwed Brett. But I really do, I have to imagine Sheamus, who's sticking around for at least a little longer, is winning this match. Especially because after the whole rumors lately and then the podcast where Sheamus has gotten kind of frustrated after all of his momentum basically going to nil for Clash. And, you know, I genuinely feel for him in that respect because it's just hard, especially when you've got a lot of good people and that WWE, at least to some degree, is getting multiple angles and multiple people invested and getting fresher faces uplifted on the show. It's hard to keep everybody involved and invested in everyone when you've got that much talent on your roster.
Yeah, but the thing is that, like, Sheamus is also not going to be around for who knows how much longer because he's 45, Edge is 49. Like, we're talking about two of the elder statesmen of the roster.
Yep. And I'm sure that factored into the choice, you know, and the fact that Christian's in AEW, so he couldn't have the match with Edge even if they wanted to. Yeah, well, probably unless Edge goes there, which I doubt. Sincerely. Oh my God. Sincerely doubt that that's going to happen. I would bet dollars to donuts that is not going to happen. Especially after Edge released his new merchandise with WWE that got a co-sponsor with the Toronto Maple Leafs. You rarely ever see that happen. Not a chance. He's going to... No. I'm just going to go ahead and say no to that one. But in any case, I really respect Edge. I think the last year of his booking sucked. I really do. You know me and Finn Balor. I had my one good match of Finn's at SummerSlam, but you know me and Finn Balor, and you know how I felt about that whole feud. You know how I feel about using a wife in the wrestling angle because the wrestlers want to work with their wives. Constantly. But then that becoming the only thing that he does. That's what bothered me, is it was just so one-dimensional after Beth was involved in the equation. Remember the Miz and Maurice thing, day one? Oh, yeah, how great was that? Oh, what a time to be alive. And... I mean, here's the thing with Edge in his second run. There are 3 things we're going to remember. The first feud with Randy Orton, because that was legitimately great. Oh, well, it had the greatest match of all time. Yeah.
So good that Edge got injured and couldn't wrestle again for a long time because it was so great.
And slow.
The weird feud with him, Roman Reigns, and Daniel Bryan.
That was, I think, my favorite stuff of his in the entire run of his. Was that and his feud with Rollins, maybe.
And his feud with Rollins. But again, the whole thing for me is that Edge should have won the world title against Roman at that Mania in a one-on-one match with his family there and gone off into the sunsets.
See, the funny thing is that, now that now that wrestling fans have done what they always do and have really started to turn on this bloodline angle, now everyone's going back and going, well, he should have lost it here, and he should have lost it here, and he should have lost it here. Like, I get what you're saying, Skylar. I don't disagree with you. Because Roman and Edge at that Mania, with Edge winning it, would have been really special, and Roman could have won it back not too long after that anyway. It's not like Edge would have held it for that long. He would have been a transitional champ at most.
If you're going to do this whole Reign of Terror Roman Reigns bullshit, you could have had Roman lose it and then get it back like Triple H did. And then you wouldn't have to be so stuck on he's been champion for this number of days. Like, nobody cares.
Oh, well, they do. They care. And that's why it happens. It's not about any of us, It's never been about any of us, as you know, Sky. At least not in the last 15 years or so.
I mean, the perception of so many people would have changed if Roman Reigns had lost the belt several times. If he had lost against Edge, Edge would have had his emotional moment, his send-off moment, and then Roman could have beat Daniel Bryan in a tournament to win the title back. He could have lost it to Drew at Clash of the Castle and given Drew his moment in front of his people instead of having that thing with the singing at the end. And then he could have lost it against Cody. And he could have easily have gotten it back or continued the feud without the belt. Whatever. I don't care.
But you mean you didn't like Kevin Dunn leaving on as a Brit and a Scottish person saying American Pie after he lost?
In front of a Welsh crowd.
When you think about it, the absurdity of how that show ended, when that show was so goddamn good, it just cracks me up, man. Just to think,
especially because if they were gonna have the thing where Austin Theory was gonna not cash in his belt, his briefcase successfully, you could have had Austin Theory cash in, make a triple threat, and Drew pins Austin for the title.
True.
And then you keep Roman strong. Again, all of this stuff, they could have redone and rebooked it.
Yeah. Because wrestling fans, like Dan O'Brien said, are fickle AF. And now we got to figure out where and how many times did WWE get this wrong.
No, but here's the thing. Let's clear something out right now. I have been clear for a long time now that Roman should have lost his belt way before Cody even. I was one of the people that was advocating that Drew should have won it at Clash of the Castle.
Oh, well, so
and I was
I.
the first one that said that he should have lost it to Edge.
Yeah, well, I will say, you and I both said that how much better it would have been if Drew had had that moment. Because I think that moment, I think, really signified the problem we're having with Drew now. Where there's nothing different and he doesn't feel as valuable because it's been proven that he's really good, but he's not good enough. Which is why I think the SummerSlam match, as good as it was, people, it took that and the Ronda and Shayna match, but Drew doesn't feel interesting anymore because it's the same New Year's, same old Drew. And that match was the start of that. But the other thing, too,
is that, nobody looks good after a Roman Reigns feud or match.
Yeah, Cody just happened to be lucky that Brock was there to basically catch his fall.
Yeah, because Sammy and Kevin Owens have not looked great.
But yeah.
Sammy and Kevin have not looked great. Seth has barely survived it, and he had to become a completely different Waluigi.
Well, and here's the problem. It's that the Bloodline angle up until recently has been so good that everyone involved in it has been elevated because of it, but it's the angle that's over, not the guys who are working in the angle. And that is part of the problem, I think. which is why I don't know, whether Jay comes back, and he'll get a huge pop when he does come back. But if Jay was out on his own just working a feud with Sammy or something, would people care? Really? I don't know.
I mean, could you picture a WrestleMania 39 finish where Cody holds up the undisputed WWE Universal Championship with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens together with their tag team title belts and the Bloodline completely defeated? Like, that would have been the cementing moment to all three of their careers, headlining the main event and showing that the Bloodline were not the story, they're the story.
You put confetti into that equation, and now you've got a WrestleMania 20 finish you can actually air again.
Well, until Kevin Owens kills his entire family.
What? Why did it have... Are you sure it'd be Kevin Owens? Because, I mean, Brandy, you want to talk about, like, just getting unhinged. I mean, I could see her getting unhinged in a fight trying to cut Cody's hair. Cody's not paying attention, and, accidents anyway.
You know that Kevin Owens would be the Chris Benoit in this situation.
Well, I mean...
Come on.
I don't want to... I don't want to say...
Would that make Sami Zayn Lance Storm?
Well, he is Canadian. I mean, they do have that in common.
Yeah, the French-Canadian Kevin Owens, who would be... I mean, Kevin Owens would be a serial killer. Just look at his music. Look at the way he talks. Look at the way that he gets angry for no reason.
Well, that's all part of it. Well, that's the whole thing they're doing with them. And but to kind of bring back your point, Sky, as far as, like, Sammy and Kevin, the last 3 pay-per-views, they have been, at most, watching the show up in the rafters. That's been...
I mean, part of the problem is that they're in the tag team division that has no tag teams.
Well, and that's just it. You had them win the belts, and then what? And that's... if I were Sammy and Kevin, as great as that WrestleMania moment was, I would have wanted to know where we were going after that, knowing that we were no longer going to be in with the Bloodline after a little while. And the fact that they didn't get anything out of that, like, I would be, if I were them, I mean, I know Kevin's injured, I know Sammy's injured, but I'd be pissed. I'd be pissed and be like, Hunter, what the hell is going on here? I know the Bloodline's the most important thing, but we were just as involved and we had just as many pops. I mean, did you hear the way people were still cheering for Sammy after, for a good 2 months afterwards?
Or at the very least, you could have done something where you take the titles off of them and give it to somebody else so they can continue being singles. Because realistically, they're not a tag team. They're just a short-term team.
Well, because they're going to do what they always do. One of them, take a guess, is going to betray the other, take a guess, and that's going to lead to them doing a bunch of hockey fights and gratuitous match spots in the ring against each other. Which is why I would prefer not to see Kevin and Sammy fight ever again, to tell you the truth. Because they kind of always have the same match.
Yes, but it's been a while, so we can see another one.
Yeah, just like Cena and Orton 2017. It's been a while. I'm sure it's going to be good.
To be fair, Cena and Orton are still pretty good.
Well, now, I mean, by definition. But, which is the other thing, I've heard whispers about Orton making his way into taking bumps, but I guess with the spinal fusion surgery that he had, no one has really done that with the kind of surgery he's had. So he's kind of in very interesting territory. So I'm not sure whether we really will ever get much more than maybe like a couple final RKOs out of nowhere when it comes to Randy Orton. Sad to say.
I feel like Randy Orton is probably going to be one of those guys who's going to end up retiring early because of injuries. But, I mean, he's had a long enough career. Like,
he's more than deserved it. I mean, not the injury, of course, but, like, to call it a career. I mean, look at how much that dude has done in the amount of time that he did it.
Yeah. Now, let's move away from Randy Orton for a second, and let's get to another group of segment in WWE that has not been treated well, and that is the women.
Boy, we've talked about the women's division a lot on this program, haven't we? I was actually looking back at old CMP episodes. At least 2 of them have been dedicated to this phenomenon.
Yeah, and we're going to try and keep it short today, but basically the reason why this has come up is because on the last Monday Night Raw that happened on August 14th, there was a match that involved Becky Lynch and Trish Stratus, which was bumped off of SummerSlam for time reasons. And it was a match where they ended up with a double disqualification countouts and a brawl that happened throughout the ring. And it was on the same show where Piper Niven just inserted herself into Chelsea Green's tag team after Sonya Deville got injured and became a tag team champion.
And instead of just relinquishing the belts and trying to make up some tag teams, they just go, here's Piper Niven. Everybody good? Okay. Nobody say anything.
As far as I like Piper Niven, and I'm happy for her that she's got a belt.
I like Piper Niven too, but why bring her back like this? What does this do? What does this say? This isn't a big return. This isn't a huge, hey, look at who's back. It's her original name. She's not Dewdrop anymore. Let's establish her with some wins. No, let's just make her, Scottish substitute teacher. You champion? Yeah, here you go. Cool. Thanks. These belts mean something. Matt Cardona wore this belt once. So, it's a big deal.
I wonder if Matt Cardona and Chelsea Green had a photo just like Sammy Guevara and Ty Mello with the belt.
Now, hey, let me ask you something. Are we not so sure that Matt Cardona got that belt and then all of a sudden got that Cody Deaner feel about him and liked wearing it? What exactly happened to Sonya Deville to get her injured? Do we know?
Torn ACL.
And how did she tear her ACL? Was it in the ring? Was it a backstage?
It was in the ring.
And we woo know that? For sure? Oh yeah. So anyway, speaking of the women's division. Oh baby, okay, tell me everything you know. Anyway, what was the point you were making, Skyler?
Well, I'm gonna drink some beer tonight.
to forget the puns. You can never forget the puns.
Tell me everything you know.
Oh Lord. Well, here's what I know.
Well, okay. Let's just cut this out. Okay, we've talked about the women's division several times. Before we even got on here, we had a group chat, me and Joshua and you, and Joshua apparently was angry today because he said "grr, women bad."
Well, that's not exactly what he said. He just got mad at Trish, and apparently this match, I have not watched it, but apparently this match with Trish and Becky was not that great. And his whole deal was that Trish needs to retire, and so do all the horsewomen, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to get into all the details of that, but what are they doing? I mean, I know, kind of to the same point, I know it's hard to keep everybody that you're trying to keep invested in people. Same thing with Sheamus, right? Same concept. I mean, Ronda was leaving, so I guess you had to put that on the show. But the women's triple threat and all of that, okay, fine. But Rhea Ripley wasn't defending her belt on the show, nor did I think she really had to, but it would have been nice for the second biggest show of the year to have her on it, seeing how valuable she is. And instead we're getting this, and I feel like, thank God, a double disqualification or whatever it wasn't on SummerSlam. Do you imagine how poorer we would have taken SummerSlam with that in our mouths?
Yeah, that would have been really bad.
Yeah, it would have hurt the rating probably from all three of us. Chances are. Because none of us would have skipped it, and all of us would have regretted it.
Yeah. Listen, again, when it comes to the women, WWE inherently is going to water down the quality of their shows just because they have Raw and SmackDown. I've said it before, I've said it again. They should only have one wrestling show and one roster and one title for each division and whatever. I've been through on this.
We've been through this. Yeah, this is year 4, Skyler. You and I have, but it's always worth repeating because nothing has changed.
Right, but the particular thing is that Joshua said that Trish Stratus should retire because she shouldn't be destroying her legacy by being involved in the current women's division. My thing is that at the end of the day, Trish Stratus is doing this not necessarily for her, but to help out Zoe Stark and to help get her career launched.
Yeah.
I don't mind that because it's to help somebody else eventually get over, to mentor someone on the main roster, which there are not that many women that you can call a legend that can mentor another woman.
Yeah, agreed. And, you know, and that's kind of my thing. It's like, if Trish was just out there doing this just for Trish, I think there would be a much stronger argument for that to be the case. But the fact that she took Zoe Stark under her wing and that she, you know, they obviously have some level of faith in her, in Zoe Stark, that they want to put someone like Trish in her corner, I'm all for that. I was all for that when they did that at Saudi Arabia, when they had the good match. But my problem is, this so-called creative team and this gaggle of writing goofs took that very well-developing storyline that they had there and did dick all of shit with it. And just massively fumbled what could have been one of the better women's rivalries of the modern era if they had played their cards right. But instead, they had a straight flush and they folded. And I don't understand it. Because now we get into this, well, this is not over, but you had this on Raw, so what does it mean now? And maybe they'll fix it at Payback. Maybe. And I'm willing to let it roll until then, because maybe they have a plan. I believe more now.
How long have we been saying that about WWE and trying to excuse bad booking?
Well, to be fair, their hit rate is a little bit better than it used to be. Not perfectly, but it's better. We can't deny that. They've had better pay-per-views. They've had better of these sub-shows, even, you know, the ones that had no business being any good, that we dreaded ended up being like, all right, you know, that wasn't actually all that bad. So I'm going to trust the process here. And it's something that I don't normally do with WWE, but I'm going to trust the process, and maybe they will turn this around come Payback, which is looking like when they're going to try and resolve this feud. And that's what I'm hoping for. Now, it does not mean that this booking isn't bad. It is. And a lot of that is writers, as I said before, not knowing how to handle these people, because Trish, when Trish is given just the recycled written material to say, it is painful to listen to her talk. But when she's on her own, she can handle it. She did before, but when she's given writing, it's bad, man. And it doesn't make you want to see more of her.
Having said that, though, at least she's not barking like a dog.
Well, she has come a long way, and I'm appreciative that Trish, with 3 kids, still decided, yeah, I'm gonna still return to at least a somewhat full-time schedule for WWE to help a women's division along that is notoriously bereft of quality talent and needs some level of credibility on top of the people that they have been pushing down our throats. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't lay the axe to 2/3 of the women in WWE's payroll as women's wrestlers. I firmly believe that to be the case. Both companies should do it. But with what we've got, we need people like Trish, whether their work is great or not. We need people like Trish to at least help some people look and feel more important than women's wrestling does now.
Okay, and let's go ahead and let's go to the flip side of this for a second, because I think it's worth mentioning. I have not liked Becky Lynch's work a lot since she has returned in SummerSlam 2022.
It's been very hit and miss. It's been very hit and miss. I think that I liked what she did with Trish. I don't think that they've handled Becky well either. To be honest with you, she doesn't have the momentum that she did before. She, as the man, that was a we were talking about flash in the pans not too long ago and fads. Becky, as proud as I was of her that she got as over as she did, the whole Becky Lynch the man thing was a fad.
Yeah, it is, and it doesn't help that Becky, of the horsewomen, is arguably the weakest in the ring.
Well, she wasn't
It's
always
between
the
her
weakest. I don't know. I still think Sasha is the worst in the ring of all of them.
Right, it's between Sasha and Becky
Well-
in terms of like in-ring ability.
Well,
I would.
yeah, but Charlotte lately has been making a case. I don't know. It's a race to the bottom with these horsewomen and lately, it seems.
Right, because we also have not been enamored with any of Bailey's stuff recently.
No,
so.
and that also speaks to the creative. It speaks to what they've been given. Bailey and Damage Control was supposed to be the next hottest thing, the big women's faction. And then what have they done except lose and lose and lose and get hurt and win the tag belts and get hurt and lose and lose and Io Sky won finally. A year later, when the leader of the faction wasn't even the one who won the belt. Like, it's that's the kind of just preposterousness, baby, that this division has been fraught with when it comes to what material they've been given. It's been lazy, if anything else.
It's also just been that they have not been able to, like, Bailey has gotten a lot of time, but I have not been impressed with what she's been doing. And a lot of the women have been given time and have not been impressed with what they're doing.
Well, and the format also doesn't help. I think that they need to not prolong these segments so damn long, and that's part of the problem too. Very few
And also, they don't need to
look
prolong
good.
these feuds because
Go ahead, keep going.
they don't need to prolong these feuds. They need to cut these short.
Yeah, they need to cut these segments short, and they need to cut these feuds short, unless they've got something they can really sink their teeth into, which they really don't try to do with the women. They don't try. It's not that they don't do it, it's that they don't try to do it. And maybe that's, I think, the bigger underlying problem, way more than Trish or any of the talentless women, the real talentless women on the roster, like Shotzi and Liv and Valhalla and all those people. You know, it's not about any one woman specifically, but like when the whole division is regarded that way, as something of an afterthought, and nobody's really putting major effort into what the women are doing, how can you invest in any of the people and not just critique their work? I don't know what to do. I don't know what the answer is now, Scott, to tell you the truth. Like, what do you do with this women's division?
Well, it's very clear what they do need to do with this women's division. They need to get some fresh talent in there, some people that are new, that we can get our teeth into. Some of the old guard are going to have to put over the new guard and get some new, fresh stars into this. And also, the booking has to be better, 100%. Not just with the women, but with the tag team division and the men's division.
Yeah, and you know, the problem is, it's still WWE. It's Triple H's WWE, but it's still WWE. So,
Yeah.
while it's hard to book, you know, you can't force a cheetah to change its spots. And I don't think that there's any desire to. I think with what we've learned about Triple H under the creative helm, no matter whether Vince is putting his, you know, his beak into the water or not, is that Triple H isn't going to ruffle any major feathers in WWE with the way he books. And that's more of the sign of, that's more what we really can expect going forward. I think we really wanted major format changes. I don't think we're ever going to get them. I think we need to just accept that and just try to take whatever we can glean out of this show for what it can be. And
So in other words, we have to sit and take it.
well, lately, and here's the thing, what Triple H has been putting out has not been bad. You know, it's hit or miss, And definitely it's been statistically better than Vince's stuff, especially towards the last 10 or 12 years of his run. You know, and I'll take Triple H's version of this better than Vince's version of this any day of the week. You know, that's an easy one. However, it's either this or what I alluded to at the end of the 38 review, WrestleMania 38, that wrestling needs to just be gone for like 40 or 50 years. Just lap a few generations and then try again. Because
I will say that this is also, it's not just a wrestling thing, this is also just a sports thing in general, is that it does feel like sports has stagnated a little bit.
Yeah, a lot bit. And I mean, the pandemic was a big part of that. But even still, ratings have been going down for pretty much every single sport. NHL took such a huge financial hit. We've talked about this on the program, that the NHL took like a 67% financial hit in 2020, so much so they had to realign everybody. Because they were like, oh God, I don't know, what do we do now? And they're still, I mean, they're doing better, but they're still not, you know, in the greatest of spots. You look at an NHL salary versus an NFL salary. Oh, Nelly Furtado.
And the other thing too is that the NBA, as much as people want to champion it as the future of sports or whatever, it's becoming very gimmicky, and I don't like the fact that it's becoming very gimmicky.
Well, and that's, the NBA has also been lower than it's been. The MLB had to do all sorts of revisions with their shot clock and the timing of the game and the pitch count and all that. You know, pretty much
I would say, though, that it's improved baseball, and it's changes that they had to make.
Well, I will say that, I'm not saying one way or the other whether they were good or bad changes. I don't watch baseball enough to be able to tell you the difference. But the point is, kind of what you were saying about gimmicks, Sky, even sports are having to do that more than they were before. You know, just needing to kind of facelift what they're doing. And I think WWE is about to hit a pretty, and wrestling, as hot as it's getting, is gonna hit a wall eventually that they will not be able to return from until they like either just completely purge it or somebody else with a completely different mindset gains some momentum and a lot of backing.
Yep. Now, for those of you who do not sport like Joshua, we'll have our sports talk later on a Super Jam session.
That's right.
But we have to move on from the news. Oh, wait, breaking news. Enzo Amore is wrestling for New Japan. Don't give a fuck. Fuck him.
I'm sorry to New Japan? Is that
fuck New Japan.
Is that the standard? Is that the standard of New Japan Pro Wrestling now? Is that, like, come on. Is Enzo gonna win the G1 Climax next year? I would, you know what? Do it. Do it. No balls. You have no balls, New Japan. Book Enzo Amore to win the G1 and piss off every single mark. That sounds, you know what? I have instantly turned around my opinion on this. Make that happen, New Japan. Troll the world.
Well, speaking of trolls, we need to get to Dark Side of the Ring.
Yeah, and well, there's trolls and there's ogres and there's a hell of a lot of drugs. If there's
lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my!
If there's one takeaway from this show, it is that there is a lot of drugs, and this season 4 of Dark Side of the Ring, and we're gonna kind of go through the list here of each episode, and we're gonna kind of break down, not necessarily like every quote, like this guy said this and this is what they talked about there, but we'll get our impressions. How you feel, how I feel, you know, whether there's an echo in the room, whether there's, you know, anything that we can possibly glean from the show, and then we're gonna just wrap up how we felt about Dark Side of the Ring in general and how it went. So, Sky, we're going to start with episode 1, which was the Tammy Sitch and Chris Candido episode. When did you watch this one? Because it's been a little while for me since I've seen it, but I do remember a decent portion of it.
So I remember watching it a couple of days after. For most of these, I watched them a couple of days after they happened. I didn't watch them when they happened.
About the same, yeah. Yeah, who's paying Vice anymore?
But I will say this. I will say this with the Chris Candido and Tammy Stitch one. I'm glad they kept Tammy's part short because this wasn't about Tammy.
Well, it kind of sounded like they almost had to, just because, for legal reasons, because she's still in the middle of all of the I killed a 75-year-old man drunk driving on a car that I did not have a license for, that I apparently quote-unquote stole. Yeah. So that I'm also glad that she almost deserves her own, just for what she's doing. But I have to agree with you, Sky. I think that this was more about Chris, and yeah, pills were a part of this, but it wasn't the whole story. And that is kind of what the episodes that I'm starting to like more are the ones that don't necessarily involve the pills or the drugs as drastically as a degree of tragedy that happens on the show.
Right. I mean, drugs have been mentioned in the past, and there's been a lot of things that have happened in the past episodes that have been mentioned from Dark Side of the Ring, but drugs became the focal point of this season 4, which is annoying.
Yeah, I thought so. I had the same feeling as well. It's almost like the moral of this season was, man, wrestlers cannot handle their drugs, can they?
Yeah.
That's not really the moral I want to take away as a wrestling fan, because that just makes wrestling seem like a pointless endeavor, especially with many casual people's perspective about wrestling being predetermined.
Right, but the other thing, too, is that I remember this. A lot of the wrestling stories that I kind of like, an issue that they had when it came to covering wrestling stories was that they tried to cover people's careers for 10, 20, 30 years in 45 minutes, or 48 minutes, depending on the commercial. It's very difficult to do that. That's why I prefer the episodes that were more about like an event that happened in wrestling history, or a moment or a match or whatever that happened in wrestling history.
Yeah, it gets a little bit more in depth as far as like the moments. Like that's why, as hilarious as the Bash at the Beach episode was, and we'll get to that, folks. That one at least went more in depth into what's going on. I mean, especially with the one like the Grams, like you're trying to wrap up a lot of history in 45 minutes and really get to the meat of the matter and encompass who these people were. But I do think this first episode did a good job of really baby-facing Candido, because he was such like a well-meaning dude. And I have seen some of Candido's work. It's just a shame he never really got into a place where he could actually really be pushed to the level that he should have been. Like, Smoky Mountain was probably the best treatment he got across the board.
And winning the NWA World title. But that was in the 90s at that point. The NWA title was kind of meaningless.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it took, until Tyrus to really restore its glory. And, no offense to all this,
but it was mainly the ECW stuff that I just, with Chris Candido, that I felt bad for.
You get the feeling that ECW was really toxic for both of them. For Sonny, too. I mean, it feels like it really, both of them had things under control. I mean, except Tammy was, bitchy, that was her thing, but she still, it worked. But you really start to get the impression that the downward spiral occurred when there was nobody to, regulate anything, and everybody just ran amok in ECW.
Yeah, as much as we have joked before that Dark Side of the Ring's biggest villain is Vince McMahon, Paul Heyman is a close second.
Well, the whole ECW crowd, because it's not even just Paulie. You can't even just blame that all on Paulie. Because a lot of that stuff just the boys were coming up with, and Paulie was like, yeah, do it, fuck it. It's like, let's get a big rating on it. That'll be a surprise.
I mean, there's New Jack.
Yeah,
remember the New Jack episode?
I do. I loved the New Jack episode. I thought that one was hilarious because New Jack is just, God rest his soul. He he was one of the scariest, but also one of the funniest dudes I've ever give an interview in the world of professional wrestling. He's just a fascinating guy. But But there's a lot of ECW that could just be unpacked into this. And actually, like you said, Sky, it's been featured quite a few times and not really in a good light in any of those times.
I think it's because, like, we all know what happened with ECW, but because it's been so long, we haven't really, like, dissected it. And the other part, too, is that, and I hate to say this, a lot of the ECW guys are either dead or in wheelchairs or have difficulty walking.
Yeah. That's...
Like, to see what Tommy Dreamer is doing right now is just sad.
What is Tommy Dreamer doing right now? I actually thought about him earlier today. I'm like, what is going on with Tommy Dreamer? I haven't seen him since this show basically ruined his career. Well, let me rephrase that. He ruined his career on this show.
Well, Impact.
Is he? Do not tell me he's still wrestling on Impact.
It's not as common, but yeah.
Oh, come on, man. Tommy Dreamer and Glenn Gilbretti. The Disco Inferno and the Kendo Stick Creep. It's, oh, God.
But that's the thing is that, like, of all the ECW guys, the only ones that have come out that are kind of good are RVD and Barely, and I guess Bully Ray. I mean, Devon's retired now, and he's good.
But they're coming back for Impact 1000.
But, I mean, look at Sabu. Look at the way Sabu can barely walk nowadays.
Yeah. Well, because they all went out there with reckless abandon. But, you know, Mike Awesome's gone. Bam Bam, who we'll get to in a minute. You know, he's gone. Mikey Whipwreck.
I mean, Rhino can barely walk.
Mikey Whipwreck, he looked bad when he went to WCW after his WWE run, let alone like in 2004 and 2010, where he looked like a bowling ball with arms and legs in a tie-dye shirt. And so he wasn't looking good. Balls is dead. Yeah, God, who else was there? I'm trying to think.
I mean, we know about Chris Benoit. We know about Eddie Guerrero. I mean, I'm sure the stuff that Chris did in ECW was not good for him.
Well, I mean, he was probably having some of the safer matches he was having on those shows. When you think about it, I bet it wasn't those that were doing the major damage. You see some of the bumps he was taking in WWE in some of those later years. That's where I think a lot of that did. It all added up. So keep an eye on that, Kevin Owens. And wow, boy, you want to talk about Dark Side of the Ring? We made this episode definitely thematic.
I mean, yeah, but again, it's like, look again at the guys that have been like affected. I mean, Terry Funk, Sabu, Taz was lucky, but even his career,
he got cut short. He got cut short in 2002. I mean, he was what, 34 when he had to stop? He wasn't that old. He had not had that long of a career. And, you know, good on him for knowing that he could translate over to the commentary booth seamlessly the way that he has. You know, and that definitely leads to a better portion of, you know, how we regard Taz nowadays. But yeah, really, Van Dam, Jerry Lynn is done. You know,
I mean, Shane Douglas is like Douglas. He's good, but like he still has issues walking around day to day.
Well, yeah, and part of that is that Shane Douglas just kept getting fired from everywhere because he kept whining about everything all the time. And that,
I mean, he was not wrong.
Yeah, well. But all he ever did was whine about shit, and that's, I think, why he never really popped. And Shane Douglas would be someone I'd like to watch a few matches of and kind of talk about one day, but that's a story for another time. But it's true. I mean, you look at most of the guys. Mick Foley. Look at how Mick Foley is now. Not saying that he was, you know, doing monstrous stuff in ECW, but him, Terry Funk. We saw him on one of these episodes.
Sandman, Raven.
Yeah. So we're looking at all these guys, and it's like, oh,
I mean,
oh God.
I hate to say this one. Just incredible.
I don't even know what's going on with him now.
Like that dude got screwed up. I mean, all these guys got screwed up wrestling that style.
Yeah, well, the style of there is no style. Let's just beat the shit out of each other with everything we can, and it gets pops. And surprise, surprise.
I mean, John Moxley wishes that he was in the ECW.
Oh yeah, and to be fair, John Moxley would fit in ECW. He would.
Yeah.
And which is why he got his start in CZW, and it's clear that he never grew out of it.
I mean, he did enough in WWE to grow out of it, but
back
when he
to
went
Candido.
back, the first chance he got.
Yeah, but back to Candido here, just to kind of bring this back around. The thing that hurts me about this one, because I thought Lance Storm was a great asset for all of the episodes he was on. He was one of my favorite parts of the whole season. Everything Lance Storm did was great. Cornette was in this one, too. But I think, and Dr. Tom, when you got talking heads like that, I'm way more invested. Yeah, just for what it's worth. And this one was just tragic because Candido had really started making a comeback, started doing some good stuff for TNA, and then it turned out just doing what he loved ended up killing him. Because he was trying to make a date, and he flew when he was hurt, and he got a blood clot. And you think, what might have been, what could he have done in TNA at a time when they needed stars and they needed someone like him.
But again, it's one of those things where Chris Candido, he was taken from us a lot sooner than he should have.
Yeah, and that, I'm sure, Candido dying did not help Tammy in her downward spiral. Because I'm sure that somewhere deep down, she's got to hold a lot of blame on herself for a lot of what happened with Chris, good or bad. And some people handle themselves with that guilt, and some people do not. And I think we all know which route Sonny took.
Yeah. I mean, we can get into Tammy's story all day, but we have more episodes to talk about.
Yes.
The one episode that may have been my favorite this entire season, but again, is just tragic still, is the Magnum TA one.
This one was good because this was an era of wrestling that I really liked going back to watch. And I'll tell you, every time I've seen TA, whether he was green or not, you could see the star power in him.
Which is why it's even more tragic that his wrestling career was robbed from us.
Yeah, and really, the fact that probably was the most who could have seen that coming accident of the bunch, save for maybe Adonis's. But it was just random. It was just like, oh my God. TA, he's gone. Like, that was it. And, the way that Dusty and Nikita worked that into a tag team championship, I did kind of smirk at that. But this just brought me nostalgia over a lot of those old Crockett era and the Mid-South. And remember that tag team match we saw in Houston? With 2 and TA.
I mean, again, Magnum TA's work was fantastic. But again, that's not the reason why we're talking about this episode. The thing with Magnum, and what I like, is that he did eventually got his life together after wrestling. Because this could have been an even more tragic story if he had developed like a painkiller addiction, or if he'd gotten into drinking to cope with pain.
Yeah, and this is kind of the direction I was hoping that there'd be more of, where you'd kind of get the guy kind of reflecting on, yeah, it was a bad time and it was tragic, but like, here's the uplifting side of this. Yeah, I'm not in really very good condition, but I'm alive. And he seemed like, to all accounts, that he's in good spirits. He had his issues, even the infidelity and whatnot. But he found a way, and he even admitted his fault there. It seems like TA is really developed as a human being and didn't let the tragedy get him down in a way that it very easily could have.
I think part of it, too, is that because Magnum TA, unfortunately, is still one of the people that is still alive, we can get his side of the story. the thing to keep in mind with, unfortunately, most of this list is that all the guys that are the subject of these stories are dead. So we can't get their point of view.
Well, and the point of views that we got, we're not really sure which way is up on some of these guys. But you know the TA was genuine. And just the real tragedy here is that what would Crockett have been if TA had stuck around and been the star that could have rivaled Hogan? Because they could have ridden that wave. He was just as popular at a time when the people who still wanted real wrestling and not the over-the-top stuff that Vince was putting out, that was what they could have held on to, and it just, we never got it.
And again, it's one of those things where, like, Magnum TA should have been the person to lead Crockett against WWF. Had TA have been around, the WWF would have been in trouble. I mean, yes, they were still strong, but Magnum TA was the type of person that you wanted, the size, the look, the wrestling ability. I mean, the tragedy of it all is that after this all happened, there were vigils at the hospital where TA was being tended to because people thought he was going to die or dead. And people cried.
So did he. Yeah. And that was the kind of emotion they had for him. That's how over he was. And the thing that's really interesting about all of this is that Crockett really went under mostly because he had a shyster of a financier who didn't inform him. One day they're making millions hand over fist, and then the next day they're $2 million in debt. And, you have to wonder if TA had stuck around and they had been making that money hand over fist, would they have encountered those kind of financial problems? Because it's not like they weren't drawing in 87 and 88. In 89 when Dusty lost control and then, Crockett had to sell and they realized that the financial situation was far worse than they had anticipated. That was different. But would TA have really turned all of that around? Especially with the way that Vince was going to be so cutthroat about Survivor Series? It's hard to say. I think they would have helped Crockett, but would it have changed the outcome entirely? I don't know.
If there's any one person that could have, it would have been Magnum TA.
That's very possible. That is very possible. And it's sad that we'll never know. We'll never know what happened there.
But again, at least of all the stories, he's the one that got the chance to get his life together, figure his life out, and for the most part, still be a successful businessman, still be able to live life to the fullest. And again, an uplifting story in a series that does not have uplifting stories.
Yeah.
But it continues with the Graham brothers.
Well, and before we get to that, can I just share to you one of my favorite TA moments that we watched, actually? And it's
sure
when they do the tar and feathering angle in January of '84, and they come back out with the promo, and TA is covered in feathers, and he must have known that to some level, the wrestling fans it was a kind of a silly sight when you look at it in a vacuum. And in his promo, he goes, "I know some of you may find this mildly humorous, but let me tell you something." That he's trying so desperately to kind of turn that around and be like, "I am furious and I have never been more humiliated in my life." And they bought a hook, line, and sinker, but it did still kind of tickle me that he fully acknowledged in that promo, this might look funny to you, but it ain't to me. and it's just a shame because there was so much potential there with TA. There was so much potential there. And then you get to a place where all that potential was realized, and then they took it away themselves in the Grahams. And I will admit to you, Sky, I know very little about wrestling from Florida. It's one of the territories I have not watched almost anything of. And I've heard everything about the Grahams, and I've heard all of the stories and how respected Eddie Graham is and how respected his father, Jerry Graham, was, Dr. Jerry, and how much Vince liked him. And I've heard a lot about Mike, and I've seen some interviews with Mike. But the amount of actual material I've seen these guys do, is like 0.
It doesn't help that WWE whitewashes wrestling history.
Which is also kind of strange because when you think about Florida, like the relationship that Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. had with Dr. Jerry and Eddie, you'd think that they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, but come on, it's Vince Jr., all right?
I know.
That is outside of his periphery.
You're right. I can't argue with that.
Anything that's outside of WWF or WWE does not matter to Vince. Except for, what can you do for me? Can you do this? Okay, cool.
How much money can I make on your tape library? Yeah. No, you're right.
Exactly.
Right. You're so right.
But, I mean, given the fact that Eddie was the one that trained Dusty Rhodes, and he's the one that helped discover Dusty Rhodes, he also took Florida, which was not a territory whatsoever besides outlaw independent mud shows, and turned it into one of the strongest NWA territories.
Yeah. Consistently. You know, you never talk. I mean, yeah, there was fluctuations in business, but like you hardly ever hear about, oh well, Florida business was down and Eddie Graham had to do X, Y, and Z to turn it back around. No, they pretty much just kept on rolling, and they didn't really have nearly as many worries and these spikes for a long time in their whole history. At least not ones that I'm familiar with. Let's qualify it with that. But it's everything about Eddie Graham screamed consistency. I mean, think about the kind of people who sat under his learning tree. You mentioned Dusty. I'll throw another name out there. Kevin Sullivan. One of the greatest wrestling minds in my book in professional wrestling, period. And he got both of them and trained both of them to be what they were. And that's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
Right, and again, he's worked with guys such as Ray Stevens, Terry Funk. He worked with guys and just helped them get along. He was, again, the NWA president, and he made sure that he did the best he could as the president of the NWA.
Yeah, and as far as giving back to the community, too, and that was one of my favorite things about that episode, was seeing the halls, you know, the Eddie Graham Memorial, you know, really trying to give back to wrestling programs, you know, in schools and things like that. You know, you could tell that while Eddie had a dark side to him as far as, you know, the toughness that he would do in the business, trying to break people in and intimidate them, / breaking arms and whatnot, and of course his drinking and eventual, you know, suicide, Eddie Graham, by all accounts, was a family man, and he cared about the business, and he cared about his community. You know, that's what made this episode, I think, so tragic, is that it's always those kinds of people that end up killing themselves, it seems.
And unfortunately, I hate to say this, the stuff that happened with Eddie also happened with his son Mike.
Well, and
think about this, Sean.
Yeah.
Think about this, Sean. 2008, Mike Graham accepts the Hall of Fame award with Dusty Rhodes there, and they have an emotional moment at the award ceremony. And 4 years later, he kills himself too.
Well, and
same exact way with a gunshot after being drunk.
Well, and the alcohol always plays a part into that. Alcohol is always one of those helpful little buddies that, you know, throws the idea into your head. And I think the daughter of Mike, I forget her name, but I think she said it perfectly. It's like once somebody gives you that out, you now view it as one. Because that's the craziest part about the story, is that's how Dr. Jerry died. So Eddie got it from his dad, and Mike got it from his dad. And that's why I think Breaking the Cycle was such an apt name for this, because it was a perfect way to highlight, I think, the daughter and the future of the Grahams, and that she has her own daughter now, and, you know, and breaking that cycle and having that kind of, that's the kind of uplifting end to these episodes that I think these first few really captured, and they really didn't regain it.
I think the hard part is just, it depends on the people that are in their lives and what happens to them after the tragedy happens.
True. I won't disagree with that. And that's, they can't all end with happy endings, but you still having some glimpse of hope for the future, and that nothing is necessarily over. You get that feeling with these where even when the wrestler in question is passed, there is still some hope to gain from some of these. Somewhere they find a way to bring it back around to some sort of meaningful position. And I think that these first 3 episodes did that, and a lot of the first few seasons did that too. But that really trailed off basically from episode 4 on.
Right. Episode 4, what happened to Doink the Clown, and Matt Bourne. This is the part of the season where the reenactments with those fake people
they started
to be
getting
the wrestler
ridiculous.
or subject.
Oh, man. They started really getting over the top. Like, cringy levels of over the top. And they would not stop doing them.
It would only get worse.
Yeah, and for really unnecessary pieces, I can't think of anyone, like, at this moment, but there was a couple that they reenacted with Bourne, I think, slapping people or whatever it was, some of these fight deals, and I didn't really know a whole lot of that stuff from Matt Bourne, but this was another one where it was like, and then the drugs took hold. Fear and loathing in professional wrestling. I'm driving 600 miles across the desert to get to the next spot show, and that's when the drugs took hold. and there's a little Easter egg for you kids. But
this is also part of the season where like the talking heads started to like the quality was going down.
Yeah.
In terms of like which talking heads were on there contributing and which ones were not.
Yes.
I don't remember who was on the Doink the Clown episode, but I don't remember coming away impressed with them.
Multiple wives, and then the ones that started, the wife and daughter that accused the other female of murdering him. And there was that whole back and forth, like, I don't care. She murdered her. I don't give a damn. I know what happened in my heart. And it's just like, it turned into like TLC, like Project Runway, like after the runway drama, and I was like, what are we doing here? And it's just, and whether it was mysterious, and I know, by the way, just on a side tangent, I hate Chris Jericho as the narrator of this show.
I mean, he's always been the worst part of the show.
And it might be because I just hate Chris Jericho now. I despise everything about what he does and what he's been doing on AEW since him calling himself Hulk Hogan in '94, and I basically treated him that way since. And
but it also doesn't help that his voice does not lend itself to a documentary style.
No,
it's not.
It doesn't.
It's not the voice of reason. It's not the voice of someone who commands a presence and is making you engage in the story that he's going to tell.
It's not like season 1 where they had Mick Foley and Dutch, who are 2 guys who can lay the groundwork. But then again, do you think Mick Foley and Dutch would want to read the kind of just reality show goo-ga that this episode specifically and a couple of these other ones had? Like, this wasn't it. And yeah, Matt Bourne had a tough life with a tough, as a promoter's son and breaking through and having all the fights and just losing it for no reason. And then the fight with Duggan in 2012, like, what are you doing? Like, you guys are both.
But it also doesn't help that they really didn't like cover Matt Bourne's wrestling career. I mean, they did, but they didn't like get in depth with it.
Well, the thing that I thought, you want to talk about the real dark side of Matt Bourne, and I'm sure you've probably heard this on Corny's podcast because that's where I heard it. But the thing about Matt Bourne is that he had to leave Mid-South, he had to leave Mid-Atlantic in 1985 or 86 or whatever it was, because allegedly, he had a relation with an underage girl and had to leave the town because the police got involved. And as a result, Crockett had to figure out somewhere else to book, and that's where he was supposed to be in, I think, with Joe Laurinaitis, and instead Joe Laurinaitis got paired up with Hawk, and that was the Road Warriors were formed. Was because Matt Bourne diddled a teenager. And considering that you did an episode on the Road Warriors, I thought that was kind of a crucial piece of information to have just left on the table. Whether you had 40 minutes or not, that's about as dark as it gets, don't you think?
It's one of those crucial details that they left out that they should have kept in.
You know, they do that instead of this, I know this woman killed my daddy, I don't care what Ambush says. Like, that was not necessary. That she said stuff, that could have all been taken out to add that piece in, because then you really would have gotten a taste of what Matt Bourne was like. And because the people still, those women still tried to defend him after all of that. And I think that would have made it really hard for that narrative to get by. But then we move.
But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. But that was the Matt Bourne episode. And then this one, kind of in a detail, leaving out situation, we get JYD. What did you think about this episode? This one was tragic because I did not realize that Junkyard Dog's daughter had also passed away at like 31 to a heart issue, which compounded that. But this was an episode that there was a lot of stuff about JYD I did not know that did not include drugs, but as usual, drugs were the focal point of this entire episode.
If they were going to do like a whole season of, okay, drugs are the reason why this wrestler is whatever, they should have just kept it to Junkyard Dog because he was the most prominent of all the people that had drug issues.
Well, and he was the one that was probably the most over and lost the most as a result of it. At least in this season, because he was on top of the world. I mean, when you think about it, and when you start to look at it, the most business that Mid-South ever did was when JYD was at the top, and they never recovered when JYD left, and they never recovered. They never really had a star at the level that Mid-South was drawing. JYD was in a league of his own. Even with Stagger Lee in a mask, didn't matter. People were in it for Junkyard Dog. At a time when no one else was having black stars at the top of their card like that. And it's a shame. What the biggest shame here, there's one piece of this. Everything else in this episode I liked, but there's one part I didn't. You want to know what that part was, Sky?
What was it?
It was Teddy Long's story about JYD in the bathroom and Bill Watts, using the N-word to say, oh, he's not going anywhere. Because I genuinely don't believe that Bill Watts would have said that.
And Jim Cornette's biggest contention was that Bill Watts never said that.
Well, but why would Bill Watts have said that? A, when Bill Watts knew how much money he was making on JYD. Why would he treat JYD like that? And B, when you look at the facts, JYD really kind of left Bill Watts to dry after Bill Watts gave him the biggest chance of his life, and yeah, there was more money to be made into WWF, and he left for more money, as a lot of guys did. But I'm more inclined to believe that was a story told later on to save face rather than the actuality of what happened. Because I just don't see Bill Watts doing that when he's the only one who really put faith in a black wrestler to begin with.
I think it's a thing where, like, I'm sure someone lied to somebody else along the way and be like, okay, you know what? We got to, do what we got to do. I don't know. I got nothing for this.
Yeah, the thing is, I learned there was a lot about that I didn't recognize. you know, as far as, you know, his family life. And again, it just went to, and then the drugs took hold. And that was the majority of this episode. And I think the reason that you're finding it hard to come up with things, Sky, is that is really, that's all they gave a fuck about. And that's all the focal point was of these episodes, at least a lot of these ones. I mean, we saw it in the Bam Bam one too. And then the drugs took hold. And the Marty Jannetty one. And then the drugs took hold and are still taking hold.
Well, I mean, if we want to go to the next one, that'd be Adrian Adonis.
Yeah, and that one, there was drugs involved in that one, you know, but that wasn't necessarily the reason that was tragic. I mean, I think that things just, there were some circumstances with Adrian Adonis that just didn't work his way, but this is the episode where we got one of my favorite quotes, which is from Bret Hart. There were two quotes that just made me laugh. And the first one was that Bret Hart says, yeah, none of us knew that cocaine was not the party drug that we all thought it was. I'm like, really, Bret? You really didn't know? Which he followed up with, yeah, you know, me and Adrian, we went into that room and there's all these wrestlers doing cocaine. And, you know, I didn't want to do it, but I knew that I had to sit there and listen to these wrestlers, and I had to snort cocaine with them so I consider the learning tree. I'm like, of all the people to be saying this, just the fact that Bret is the one doing it, just like, oh, it tickled me. It just tickled me. See, so maybe he is not the as the model of righteous deeds as he had been in gimmick led to portray you as.
Can we just say that with Adrian Adonis, like, fuck you, Vince McMahon?
Well, I know, again, besides the limited pieces of what I saw here, I knew very little about Adrian Adonis. And Vince, the thing about Vince is that all the credit in the world to Adrian Adonis, he tried to make it work. And to some degree he did, but boy, was there a need for it? No. But it wouldn't be the first time that Vince did it, and it definitely would not be the last time that Vince did something like this. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten Billy and Chuck. Remember that? Billy and Chuck, the gay but they're not gay couple, but we're going to have a commitment ceremony even though we're not gay. And Rico is our just flamboyant hairdresser, and he's not gay either, but he's just going to... Yeah. It's not the first realm of putting the feelers into the bunghole that Vince has done. It's just a shame that it happened to somebody like Adrian Adonis, whose upside was so much more than that.
I mean, I forgot that Adrian Adonis wrestled against Roddy Piper at Mania 3 in a hair versus hair match.
Yeah, I mean, they treated him with some level of importance for a while. It's just that when you get put with a gimmick like that, how far can it possibly go? You know, and then when it's gone, and the money's gone, and your habit's still there, you know, and that's the difficulty. You know, and then just to have it all end in such a tragic accident like that, with, you know, all of them in the, you know, in the ravine or the quarry or the river, whatever it was, with the car overturned and everybody, only one person making it out alive. And that was...
And I think that's also another tragic thing with Adrian Adonis, is that it wasn't just him that died, but it was other people that also died.
Yeah, and seeing the only survivor, the one of the twins, you know, say, you know, recount, you could see the pain. You could see the pain he was going through, even just recounting it. But, you know, he had maybe one of the better lines of the whole episode where he said, you know, we do our best and that's all we can do. And that one was an interesting one, and I thought this was also kind of a better episode in this whole situation. And then we get this. Abdullah the Butcher. Oh, God. What do we say about this? Well, first of all, Abdullah the Butcher, he's this situation is actually kind of ridiculous because he's a guy who got over for all of the stuff that we hate about wrestling now, but at a time when people believed the danger involved in wrestling and that he was this crazy guy, he made it work. You know, and apparently he was apparently he dropped out in second grade. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know whether I believe he can't read or write either after all of this, but you almost felt like the way that they shoehorned this whole Hannibal thing into this episode, Sky, that they were really kind of scrounging to come up with something when they had maybe two separate stories here, and they could have just let Hannibal's be his own, or better yet, not put Hannibal in at all.
Let's be clear. Hannibal is one of the worst... Right now, Hannibal is one of the worst things about deathmatch wrestlers and deathmatch people. Like, him and Nick Gage can go fuck off, for all I care.
Well, this Mark starts his own wrestling promotion, because he apparently has unlimited capital, and booked himself to be in all these matches. This is his own promotion. And you know what his videos are now, Sky? You know what he's doing now? And why he got himself on the dark side? His channel, I just saw it one day, I busted out laughing. The name of his channel is Hannibal Wrestling and UFO Videos. And his channel is him reading off and reviewing the Wrestling Observer. That's his show. That's Hannibal's channel right now. And reposting shoots he did 4 years ago where he personality-less goes, "Oh, who'd you like to work with?" It's this guy. There is nothing to redeem about this dude, and the fact that he got half of this program's time over an incident that he should have never sued for because he's the one who probably suggested it happen is... this whole thing just made everybody look stupid. And I think Abdullah knew it was wrong. I think that Hannibal knew it was wrong. And all of this stuff about, you know, all of the lawsuits and stuff like that. And, you know, Corny said it, it's a heel program. Nobody came out of this episode looking any good at all. You didn't really feel as much sympathy for Abdullah as I think they made you want to. And it just further emphasized that Hannibal should never have been allowed to do anything involving wrestling ever.
I want to do a quick sidetrack. Did the Heroes of Wrestling ever get covered in...
No, but I thought about that for if they're going to do a season 5, which I kind of think they shouldn't, but if they do one, that's probably the event I'd cover.
Because I feel like that was, like, one of the things that, like, they should have, if they were going to take Hannibal's part out, they should have talked about that more and Abdullah's part in it.
Yeah. Well, and also another person who'd be a good talking head about that would be Jake Roberts. Who, by the way...
I mean, he would be the person that they'd be talking about.
Yeah, oh, and by the way, well, there's a lot to talk about on that show, like an 800-pound Yokozuna not moving. But in any case, one of the things that just while we mentioned Jake Roberts, another thing I did like about the Junkyard Dog episode, just because we did gloss over it a little bit, I did think that Jake's perspective on that one was really good because it came from the perspective of what JYD was feeling as an addict. And that's something that I think Jake, if there's any one good quality Jake's got, is having that kind of experience to be able to speak from. Like when Jake said, "How did you feel when JYD died?" And Jake said, "I was fucking mad at him because I was jealous." I thought that hit pretty hard. And that was one point that I think that Jake did really do a good job of doing here. There was nothing in this Abdullah the Butcher episode anywhere near that made you sympathize with anybody.
Right, and again,
maybe Abdullah's caretaker.
That, like, we're supposed to feel sympathy for, we don't.
Yeah, that would be a theme. That would be but that was Abdullah's episode, and I think that Hannibal kind of deserved his own for all the stupid stuff that he's done over the years. But it's that one I didn't think really captured either person adequately for what they were trying to do. But I did like the Bam Bam episode. even though they didn't have great talking heads for it, but they had his family. They had his family, which I think was definitely a good, a lot. But this was another one. And then the drugs took hold. And that was the episode. And the only thing out of this episode I even want to talk about is the fact that Andre the Giant apparently took some liberties with it when people were kind of resentful of the fact that he was pushed so fast at such a young age. And the boys didn't like that at all. That was the only thing that I thought was surprising out of this. Other than that, I didn't find that Meltzer contributed a damn thing to this episode.
Oh, yeah, this was the one with Meltzer on it.
There were a couple with Meltzer on it. This one, he did dick all of anything. There was nothing that he added to that conversation.
Because did Dave Meltzer spend any time with Bam Bam Bigelow?
No. Well, who has Dave Meltzer actually spent time with other than his computer and the Young Bucks? And his own dick?
Brian Alvarez.
Okay. That's kind of the same thing as his own dick, but yeah, I get you. But
yeah, did you learn anything new about Bam Bam in this episode that you didn't already know before?
Well, that he was a big fucker in high school and in college. That was about it. But I would have guessed that probably. I knew that. The thing I didn't know about this was that Dallas had tried wrestling, had 3 matches, and quit before he came back to manage. That I did not know.
Now, here's the thing. I don't know this one entirely because, this episode was one of the ones that I kind of, glossed over. Did they talk about what happened with him in Mexico City, Bam Bam?
Remind me what happened in Mexico City.
That Bam Bam worked as a bounty hunter in Mexico and was arrested and was in prison in Mexico for 6 months.
I don't know if they actually got all the way through that. It might have been touched on, but I don't know if they actually really. They did very slightly, but they didn't go into too much detail about that. But yeah, they did mention Mexico City, and it was part of it. But again, that wasn't really a feature because the feature, like most of the rest of them, was drugs. So I like Bam Bam. It reminds me of how little I've seen of Bam Bam, but it also reminds me how well he did, and I'm happy he got that main event with Lawrence Taylor. Which was a better match than it had any right to be. So I will, and only Bam Bam would have been able to do that. And it's a credit to how fast he picked up the business, and it's a credit to how well he did. It's just, again, look what happened. And
I also feel like Bam Bam was just a victim of being in WWF during the new age, the new era, when it was at its lowest point and there was nothing to him.
Well, and the difficulty is WWE wouldn't keep him because of his off the field issues, so to speak, with the pills. And at the time, when you think Bam Bam probably could have found a way if he had really tried and really wanted to and had really applied himself, further and even, just not even talking about his family, but in the Attitude Era, Bam Bam could have found a spot, maybe not necessarily in the top spot, but to come in every now and then and to work with somebody like Austin or The Rock or even Triple H and beat the piss out of him at that time. That'd be fun to watch. He could have found a spot, and instead, ECW, the place where drugs run free. And,
brother.
Yeah, and that's, well, Hogan didn't need ECW to keep that wave rolling. He had Bischoff, which leads us to the Bash at the Beach 2000 episode. Easily one of the funniest episodes because it's 3 guys who all made themselves look worse, and there's Jeff Jarrett.
This was the one that was both simultaneously the best and worst episode of the entire season.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. What was your favorite? There was so much to love about this episode, Sky. What did you love about it?
Just the fact that Vince Russo said Eric Bischoff has never contributed anything positive to wrestling. I'm like, well, you know who you're talking about, and you know who you are, right?
Yeah, but Russo still thinks he's good. That's the thing. He still thinks he's hot shit. And after all these years, he still thinks.
I know for reasons that they could not get Hulk Hogan to be on this episode because Hulk Hogan never would have done it.
Well, if he had done it, you wouldn't have gotten the truth out of Hulk Hogan. What value would that have been? Oh, you want to get somebody who we know is going to lie on the show? Yeah, let's try that out for $40,000 of that for 5 minutes. Nah, I'm good.
I mean, because Russo and Eric Bischoff lied.
Yeah, but they probably were not getting paid $40,000 a pop for 5 minutes of of interview time. They were probably paid something, but not the number that Hogan would have asked for.
I don't know. I will say this: the Bash at the Beach 2000 episode. I think what it was that helped was that because this was only a singular event, and they could talk about the stuff that was leading up to it. They were able to get more in depth about like this event and what happened, rather than try and cover a guy's wrestling career for 30 years.
Even though the jury's still kind of out on who knew what when, because everyone has a different version of this.
But that's the thing, is that this is my story, my version, and then Jeff Jarrett being the straight man, like, I was just there.
And I didn't want to do this shit. And here's the thing. I'm not saying Jeff Jarrett is lying, but you got to remember where Jeff Jarrett's loyalties were. It was to Vince Russo, because Russo was promising Jeff to get a push, and so yes, Jeff may have had reservations about this, but do I believe that he was really contemplating shooting on Hogan? I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, the fact that it took that long for him to come out of the ramp, that is something. But I don't know. I don't know about that. But in any circumstance, here's what I believe to be true about this. They both agree that the angle where Jarrett laying down and Hogan saying all of that was part of the plan. And my question is, why do either of you think that was a good idea?
I mean, come on, it's not a good idea.
Why did both of you agree on that being the move? Because that was, like Jarrett said, that was probably the worst thing you could have done, promo or otherwise.
Remember, we were talking about WCW in 2000. Like, they were desperate because they were getting their asses handed to them by WWF. They were desperate to get any sort of, like, heat, energy, excitement in the show.
Yeah, and then, well, that's the thing. It's that I feel like you could have easily kind of drawn this out further, and my whole thing would have been this. Let Hogan fucking win it. Let Hogan win the damn belt. Look, he's still Hulk Hogan. Yeah, people have really lowered on him, but, like, here's the thing. If you wanted to do this deal like Bischoff was proposing, that he was going to walk away or like that he was going to get disgusted because of that, walk out and come back at Halloween Havoc, here's how you do this. You have the match. Hogan still leaves Bash at the Beach with the belt. The next night on Nitro, you have Vince Russo say, well, I talked to Brad Siegel at, Turner, and he and I both agree that one human being having this much power in the wrestling business that isn't the guys running the show is not healthy. So as of right now, I have the creative control to strip you of that belt and have a new match to assign a new champion, and then Hulk can get pissed at that and storm off and keep that belt, and then come back at Halloween Havoc going, I never got pinned because Vince Russo's a knob. But in any case, instead, what we get is this lay-down garbage that just nobody cared about. And again, Lance Storm goes, was this the plan? And it just killed me. Because that really does sum it up, doesn't it? Yeah. It's, and Russo, you can't trust him as far as you can throw him. And Bischoff, while he's better spoken, you can't trust him as far as you can throw him either. And Meltzer's in there, and he gets pot shots thrown at him when he's going, I don't know, I hated both of them, and I wasn't even paying attention. They put Meltzer in there to go, I don't know, I wasn't really even watching. I've kind of blocked it. That was the whole reason Meltzer was there, and then Bischoff shoots on Meltzer for no reason. This episode was all over the map, bro. Bro, I am telling you. When I tell you I walked into Vince McMahon's office and I told him this episode is going to suck, bro. Nobody wants this wrestling. Oh, it's painful. Do you feel the pain, Sky?
Can you please stop?
Well, we have one more stop to go, and then we're going to stop this show for good. It's Marty Jannetty.
Now, here's the thing with Marty. You kept trying to say that, like, we should feel bad for Marty. No.
No.
We don't feel bad for Marty. We feel bad that Marty got in that situation, but as I likened to before, he's that friend that keeps making bad decisions, and you want to like him, but he keeps making those bad decisions, and you keep telling him to stop, but he won't stop.
Well, that's even what his friends and, the people close to him were saying. They were all saying, yeah, he's completely full of shit, and we all love him, but he's completely full of shit, and he's, and he's the champion of his own mind. And that was the thing with Marty's episode, and I just thought that this episode, yeah, it was sad, but it was like, it was sadder to see Marty now than it was to see what happened to him leading up to now. Because you could tell that he's still in it. He's still drinking that same Kool-Aid. It's not like the TA episode where he's sitting there going, yeah, it's tragic how it all went up, but, I'm a better person for it. Marty's like, ha, God has it in for me, doesn't he? And that just put me off the whole episode. And it completely, and yeah, it reminded me of how good Marty was, and the story of the Rockers coming together as the Midnight Rockers and all that jazz. And boy, I didn't think at the end of this episode that Shawn Michaels would end up being the biggest babyface.
Shawn Michaels was not the babyface.
Oh, yes, he was. Yes, he was. They showed the episode. They showed the shoot interview where Shawn goes, yeah, I liked Marty, and Shawn sadly saw the writing on the wall with Marty that he wasn't changing and that Vince had, plans for Shawn, and I'm sure Shawn had some voice in the office about that anyway, but at the same time...
Shawn Michaels was all about self-preservation, okay?
Yeah, but was that true when he went and baptized Marty and got him in to reunite with the Rockers in 2005? And then,
at that point, Shawn Michaels was a different person. But I'm talking about the original splits.
Well, the original split, that's Shawn Michaels. But the fact that one of Marty's friends said, yeah, Shawn had issues, but he didn't have issues the way Marty had drug issues. I thought, and I'm sitting there going, is that possible? And clearly, yes, because, say what you want about Shawn, he eventually figured it out. And, and he did turn things around, and now Shawn is like like you said, a completely different person, and baptized, and even put in a word for Marty a few different times, to try and get Marty going and try to get him back involved in the equation. Even if it was with the New Rockers with Leif Cassidy, it was Shawn,
that was doomed to fail.
It was, but at least Shawn tried a few times to get Marty back into the fold. And he did not have, even when he was at his worst, and he didn't have to do that. He always tried to look out for Marty. And even Marty said, yeah, I love Shawn. At the end of this, yeah, I love Shawn. You know, he's a good guy. After all of this, how does Shawn Michaels become the babyface in the Marty Jannetty episode of Dark Side of the Ring?
Because he was a born-again Christian.
Yeah, it's something, man. And then to see Marty's leg and all of that, and then to end it with this whole wrestling storyline, buying weed from the guy behind the bowling alley who tried to fuck him, and he killed the guy with the rock, and he threw him in the river. But wait, it wasn't the river, he burned him. And that was the end of the episode. It's like, I didn't throw him in the river, I burned him. And then the lady going, yeah, that probably happened. That was the end of that episode?
And the reenactment was terrible.
Oh, well, this one had my favorite over-the-top reenactment of all of them. When Marty was telling the story about the blue and the orange liquid in science class, and it blew up, and then the lady got, like, ricocheted in the back, and they literally, like, took her on a rappel and launched her back out of frame. I'm like, oh, come on. That was so ridiculous. It was so dumb. But that kind of just gets to the overall point here that I want to make as we approach 2 hours, but we will not get there because we're going to wrap this up. Here's my thing. What stories are left for this show to cover that aren't just going to be, and then the unthinkable drugs happened? What's left?
The Saudi Arabian plane trip from hell.
Okay. And there's no way they're going to get the clearance to talk about that. Because everyone's still employed there, and there's no way they're getting talking heads to talk about that. Not yet.
Andrade's not there, and he could tell.
So you're going to have Andrade talk for 40 minutes? I would love to see how that episode went. Please tell me how that episode goes, if you can understand it. So
I'm sure you could give people that were there that could talk about it. Maybe,
yeah, but then what happens to Saudi Arabia? They come over and they go, yeah, we're gonna chop everyone at Evan Eisner's or Jason Eisner and Evan Husney's heads off because they're talking shit about Saudi Arabia. You know, I don't know. I feel like that's still too fresh. Heroes of Wrestling they could do. Well, what else? Who else they got?
Plane Ride from Hell.
We did that.
No, the original. Well, I mean, the one that almost. You could do one on Ric Flair's plane crash.
Flair's plane crash? Okay, potentially on Flair's plane crash. But yeah, the only person who died in that was the pilot. And yeah, I'm not saying that wasn't a tragedy. Sorry to the pilot's family if you're listening, but like in that situation, that ended up turning Ric Flair into a phenomenon. You might almost make the case for just Ric Flair. Period.
I mean, yeah, you'd have to do Ric Flair at some point, and they haven't yet.
Yeah, I mean, you almost make that case, there alone. You could almost do one on Hogan at this point.
You might have to do one on Hogan. Have they done one on Savage?
Yeah, they did. That was the first episode. Savage and Elizabeth.
Right, my bad.
Yep, that was which was a very good episode.
Like for example, if I suggest Sabu or Terry Funk, they were going to be like, but then the drugs kicked in.
What's different? Exactly. But they should do one on the Sheik, the original Sheik. Because he's what I'd like to see. But the problem is, I think that they've covered a lot of the major stories. So they're running out of stories to tell. These reenactments are getting over the top, and I really do feel like this format has staled. And it's not working. It's not working the way it was, and I don't think they have enough viewership to sustain this kind of format for the programming that they do. And I want them to still do stuff, right? What I would like to see them do is maybe do a transition to this and then do like some promoter wars type of deals. Like talk about the separation between Jerry Jarrett and Goulas, or their fight with them in the ICW and Paphos Outlaw territory. Or even the acquisition from Vince Sr. to Jr. and how that whole transition took place.
Are you saying Tales of the Territory Season 2?
Well, maybe without The Rock's involvement, because The Rock's involvement was the ratings stink of Grisly Death. but you leave him out of this, and they might be able to do that. And I'm not saying let's go in each territory, but get a group of historians together and give me stats, and let's recount these are the details, and this guy took this person. Because unless you're going back to the 1930s Montreal screw job with Gotch and Hackenschmidt, you're going to really start losing some momentum on these episodes, because there's just not enough. I think we've seen enough of the dark side of the ring. I'd like to see some of the lighter side of the ring. Or talk about history.
Again, if you are going to do Dark Side of the Ring for season 5, don't have so many stories that are dependent on, and then the drugs took over.
Yeah, I mean, we should get one on Roddy Piper because of his tragic, background, which is hard to actually glean what happened in his past, because he kept a lot of those cards close to his chest. But if you got the
other thing
right
you have to
people
keep in mind is that because of certain people, you can't get a lot of information, because at the end of the day, they're dead and there's not that many people left to tell the story. I mean, I'm sure they would love to do the 1930s Montreal screw job, but there's nobody left from that time.
Yeah. Well, except for historians, the only one I can really name who'd be able to speak on it now is Cornette, which also begs part of the problem. There aren't enough people to give factual background information on a lot of this stuff to not make it feel like it's all coming from a narrative-driven point of view.
I mean, when you have Brian Meltzer on there.
Well, and Brian Meltzer, that's right, and Dave Alvarez.
Dave Meltzer.
and see, I told you that they were just, they're their own dick. That's the whole thing. But in any case,
I think I'm too tired and I can't talk no more.
Well, the whole thing is that I think that I hope this is the last of Dark Side of the Ring we see. I want to see more from Evan and Jason, but there needs to be a format change of some description. Just like this show, even though we've been promising it and it hasn't happened yet, trust me, folks, it's going to happen. Either way, it's going to happen. But speaking of being tired, it has been a long episode. We've talked about a lot of things, but they're all things I'm happy we got to talk about, Sky. And next time, because there is going to be a next time, I am finally going to answer your challenge from the TAW video where we nulled ACPW and NWL, because I have my Finn Balor world title booking ready for you, sir.
We're going to have to talk about Finn Balor again.
We're going to have to talk about him. You're going to hear how I meticulously worked from SummerSlam 23 to WrestleMania 41, Finn Balor winning the Universal Heavyweight Championship of the world.
And hopefully we'll get Josh again on there too, so he can clean his pants.
Yes, and hopefully he will have an answer, and maybe you will in fact have an answer. But right now the question is, will these guys ever shut up? And yes, we will. Because we will see you after a short commercial break. Skyler, thank you as always for being a part of this program and showing that we are the lighter side, the brightest side of the wrestling podcasting world.
Thank you for having me on.
Always, my friend, and we will see all of you right after this.